Welcome, James. How's it going?
What's up, dude? How you been?
I've been really good, man. It's good to see you.
You too,
I'm glad I dressed up for you.
right? I
Yeah.
did my recording for the LCI Congress at 6 o'clock this morning. So I'm like, I should have thought all the way through this, but I had a.
Yeah.
That's why I have a nice shirt on today for one.
Nice. Welcome to the EBFC show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction. Today's episode is sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Thank you, LCI. Now, to the show. Welcome to the show, James Pease, good friend of mine, longtime lean practitioner. James, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them a little bit about who is James Pease.
Oh, it's a deep and dark, complicated question, but I'll give you the professional highlights. So I studied management science in college, mainly because I dropped out of engineering, and then I never really used it again until like 15 years into my career journey. So I ended up getting a job as an intern in design and construction for a hospital,
Okay.
and that was 17 years ago now.
Wow.
Um, Mostly did lump sum construction projects, low bid. That was really the only anything they taught me how to do. I changed jobs and got introduced to CM at risk with a little bit of pre-construction and design assist trade partners. And it was really at the beginning of BIM for construction. And so we were arguing about like whether we were going to pay for it or not, or whether we actually wanted BIM and it would add any value. And this is on like a ground up Oshpod hospital, which
Wow.
now it's a no brainer, but then it was kind of new. And I think we invested a lot in people learning how to do it. And from there I changed and I spent 12 years at Sutter Health and was fortunate when I started at Sutter Health to land on one of the early IPD projects. And so there are definitely a lot of people there that got it moving, but I landed on a project that I was told by Dave Pixley, you have to do all your projects with IPD from now on. And so I didn't know what that meant. I took the contract home and read it, and he was my boss, and he just hired me. So I didn't know otherwise. I found out years later that I was the only one that really listened and just did it.
Were you the new guy?
I was the new guy, and so
Perfect.
I was. My first project was like a $20 million project, which was a good size to learn on because I made a lot of mistakes, but they weren't so big that leadership noticed. So I'd recommend that if you can. Try
Start
not to.
small. That's good advice, James. Already given the nuggets. Start small.
Yeah, don't start so small that you can't gain anything. So a project has to be big enough that the upfront investment will give you some kind of return. But don't start so big that if something goes wrong, you get fired. Like that's bad.
That that is bad.
So I had the opportunity to work on over 20 IPD projects while I was at Sutter. It was really a lot of fun. And about a year ago, I left. And so I'm now the executive director for design and construction at UCSF Health. And so we do everything from kind of small equipment replacements up to full gut remodels on floors and a new hospital tower that we're working on over in Oakland. And the hope is to build off the work done by Stuart Ekblatt and team on major capital projects to start implementing IPD with a full integrated form of agreement in the public space so that we can create some case studies for other public owners out there and see if we can't shake this loose a little bit.
Please shake it loose.
So, and now, then I got
Yeah.
introduced, just one last thing, to lean construction.
Yeah.
When I started at Sutter, I got invited to the LCI meetings, and it was like all of that lean manufacturing stuff I did in college. All of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I studied something about this. And seems like it's been a nice intersection now.
No, that is an excellent background. And But that last little part, you're downplaying how big that is. 20 lean IPD projects, right? And do you distinguish a difference between lean IPD and IPD? And integrated project
Um,
delivery for everybody who doesn't know the acronym bookmarks and glossary we're dealing in.
I can give a little. So I didn't used to. So I would say
Okay.
lean construction, a lean project could have any contract model, and that is where you would implement last planner system. You'd be looking at using target value design if you can get your partners on board early. Implementation of 5S, just keeping the worksite clean, I would say, is a lean principle. So all of this borrowed from the Toyota way in
Right.
manufacturing and with various implementations in construction. IPD, I used to think as long as you had an integrated team, I was calling it IPD. I'm now kind of transitioned to the camp where I think an integrated contract where design and construction are under a single contract with a shared risk and reward pool, where there's some mutual indemnification of parties, I think you will get better outcomes. So I would call that kind of a true integrated form of agreement, true IPD approach. Um, I put lean IPD because I have experienced you can have an integrated contract and still run things very traditionally and not unlock the value of having everybody on board
Mm.
early. So for me, the sweet spot is taking lean construction principles and combining them with an integrated contract where scope can flow back and forth between design and construction partners with relatively little friction, so that you're not arguing about transferring scope. It's in everyone's best interest to let the scope go to wherever it can best be done.
Nice. Good.
That's what I would call lean IPD,
Well,
combination
good.
of the
There's one thing that we're not going to debate on.
two. There we go.
Yeah, and I like too that you told everybody from your perspective, and it's a rich perspective, James, that you have, that anybody, any contract type can do lean construction. I totally agree,
And
and
should.
should, right? Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat as you. My first couple at bats with lean construction, I was on back to back hard bid projects, traditional design bid build, and it didn't even occur to me that I was swimming upstream. So I like that you're reinforcing. I just kind of
Design
like that.
bid build definitely has some, as you said, it's got a current that's rushing against you that makes it harder to get people to collaborate, because
Yeah.
it's just by its nature, it's everyone's out for themselves. And, if you win, I'm probably losing. And if I
Yeah.
win, you're probably losing. Right. And so it's hard to get people to give and take. And that's a message to the owners. You get the outcomes you set your projects up for. So think
Yeah.
about how you set them up.
Yeah. You always get exactly what you asked for. No
Exactly.
surprises.
People don't realize that that's what they're setting themselves up for, but that's actually what's happening, I think.
Right. And then you mentioned too, you dabbled a little bit in CM at risk. That was probably, if I had to date, that early '90s before your soiree with BIM and Oshpod.
Well, I'd say early 2000s.
Early
Um,
2000s. Okay.
early 2000s. And it was just, other than Sutter at the time, nobody was, I mean, Sutter really didn't start implementing IPD on more than one or two pilot projects until like 2012 or something like that. I mean,
Okay.
2015. Um, so, you had the big hospitals, but they take a decade. So
Right.
it seems like it started a lot earlier than it did. But the CM at risk, even at Sutter, we did a lot of CM at risk. I mean, projects of a certain dollar value and a certain complexity, CM at risk, I think is a good model. The complexity of the time tracking and the cost tracking in a true IPD model, I think there's some projects that you'll never see the benefit of that. The projects are straightforward enough. If you hire good partners, people that you've worked with for a long time, even, lump sum, you can get good outcomes. It's
Right.
that design, bid, build, low bid, no pre-construction design, bid, build that gets you in trouble.
Right. And you're still reinforcing what we know. Anybody who's been in the business for more than a decade, the team is so critical. You know, who you get, who gets selected, has a lot to do on project success.
Yeah, I agree. I learned that the hard way, that, you know, you can have a company that's got all the resume, but the team you get just doesn't have the experience to do things in a lean way, and vice versa. I've had companies that weren't supposed to be successful because it wasn't their typical product that they built. It was outside of their wheelhouse, but a team was really open-minded, and they far exceeded my expectations. So it's more about who you get and giving them opportunity once you get them to be successful than the company that you hire. And the other thing I realized is you should put the right type of company on the right type of project. So, you know, the big sophisticated contractors I learned are probably not the right company to do like a 10,000 square foot outpatient clinic. There's just too much overhead and too much process, and that some of these less sophisticated, technologically less sophisticated companies could do a great high quality job at a much better price point. So you want to actually think about what the job is and who are the right partners for it. And I don't think there's a one size fits all contractor, designer, trade partner. The more you think about it, the more you want to align what you're doing with the team.
Right. And some of the big general contractors have even, in response to that, have created small, nimble groups that only do like little TI work for niche clients and niche markets in certain cities. So I mean, there is something to that. And you're right. And, you know, the smaller, very nimble contractors won't be set up to handle something really complex. Yeah, I mean, recently, you know, and thank you again for sharing on the show, James. 100% appreciate that. You're under no obligation as a board member for the Lean Construction Institute to make an appearance on the show that they sponsor. So that was just cool. When you started Lean IPD a couple of years ago, I remember you sending me and a friend of mine an invite to come check out this webinar. And I was like, man, this is going to be interesting. I was like, I've never gone to a webinar that was organized by and hosted by, you know, a traditional owner. And your webinar was actually good. Like it was on. Yeah, I mean, it was on. We watched it together in a conference because we were cheap. We cheaped out and just bought one ticket and sat together and watched it. This was before BCE, before COVID ever. So
Right.
We could be in a conference room all close. And you were presenting ideas on lean construction, and my friend kept elbowing me like, you see, owners do care. And it was like, I know they're out there. So what made you get started with Lean IPD, the website, and what is that as a thing?
Yeah, maybe as a little bit of background. So my first webinars, I think, were from the Lean Construction Institute. The first presentation I ever did was actually after my first IPD project. I got invited to Colorado back in Boulder, back when LCI was like 300 people in one room, and there were no breakout rooms. And I was late to the party. I mean, that was probably 15 years into it or something. But I did the presentation and I got some good feedback on it. And I said, well, you know, well, first of all, I saw that. So leanipd.com is a website, and it's focused on lean construction and integrated project delivery. I'm the editor, so it's something that I put out there, but I have an excellent advisory board and a ton of experts that write content for the website, including you. And thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
The reason I started the website is because I was surprised that somebody didn't own leanipd.com already. So I bought the website on a whim, probably after having a beer on a Friday night. I said, okay, I'll put the PDF slides of one of my presentations up there. And then I started reading a little bit, like, oh, they won't find it. I need to make this into a case study with HTML so that Google will rank it. And I probably spent the first 3 years doing the work myself on the weekends and at night. You can pretty much learn to do anything on YouTube. You might not be able to do it well, but you can learn how to do something.
Yeah, so we got to get you a certificate that you graduated from the school of YouTube.
Yeah,
So many people
well,
have.
I don't know if I've graduated, but I've taken some classes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's really a passion project. I like interacting with people that find the content. I like being able to share it with people. And probably more recently, what I've realized is that writing helps me formalize my thoughts.
Mm.
It helps me distill. When you try to, there may be something that you know, but until you try to explain it to somebody else, you don't actually organize it and create it into chunks that you can explain and share with somebody. So I think the webinars and the writing, it made me better at my day job because I just had to try to explain what I was thinking. So that's been an outlet for me, is to just try to write down what it is that I'm thinking and share it with somebody. That's a long-winded summary, but that's what the
No.
website is.
And I think for people that don't know, like I myself consume James's website pretty regularly, even before I committed any content to it. There's a lot of really good stuff on that site. If you're thinking about doing lean construction on your project, even if you're not to the point yet, and it doesn't matter who you are, if you're a trade partner, general contractor, recovering general contractor, or even a construction manager, there are really good articles and content on that site that can benefit your project like right now, today. I could almost guarantee you that you're facing something right now that an article post on Lean IPD can help you with. And there have been many posts that have helped me, and the outpouring, James, of people for the stuff that I've written and shared on your site has been incredible. Like, so, I mean, people are reading the site. Like, a lot of people are reading the site.
Well, that's a great endorsement. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And the organization's really good. I love too that your site is like, it's a great example of a site of today, 2020. It's not dated. It's like fresh. It's changed over time. I remember when you rebranded it and updated it, and I thought, is it time to rebrand the site yet? And you go around the internet, and you were probably, ahead of the curve. You were definitely in the first wave of sites that were changing the appearance and the usage for folks to make it easier to navigate. So my hat's off to you.
That was above my YouTube skills. That was the point where I've done a small amount of consulting, and that's all plowed back in. So I actually hired somebody to help me do that because it was above. There was a vision there, but no skills.
No. That's in true ownership style. You hire others. You know where your expertise domain is and where it's not. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So that's good, and it gives me my weekends back mostly.
Yeah, that is really good. But the content is really good. Even just the approach. And you mentioned some things that I think might be worth exploring a little deeper, like target value delivery. And you specifically said, if you can get your partners to do it with you. And I think that's a great thing, because I've been asked inside of our company, like, when should we apply TVD, target value delivery, target value design? Some people say design, but if you include construction work, we have to change it to delivery. And why would a general contractor ever not include construction? We wouldn't. So it's always TVD with delivery at the end. But I always tell people, like, you want to have the owner bought in. Like, you want to be sure that the owner wants this, because the amount of work that they have to do is, if a regular job, the work level for them is here, like on a design bid build, and maybe a design build is somewhere here, TVD for an owner is like here. It's like the most involved that they can possibly be, I think. Right? I can't think of, outside of an IFOA, right? In most integrated forms of agreement, you're using the target value delivery approach anyway.
Yeah. That I like the way you put that, though, because that's true. A lot of times people will say, why don't more people do IPD in general? And I said, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
And I heard an owner one time say, we're going to go with design build because we just don't have the PMs to do the upfront work for the projects, which I didn't agree with at first, but now that I have more of a programmatic view, I get it. It's a lot of work. I've never learned more about design and construction and how things work than being on an IPD job surrounded by experts and working through issues. Like, why should we use different structural systems or different ways of cooling the building, or what are the different ways we could distribute the power? Like, what the most fun thing is doing target value design when you have like project engineers that it's their first job, and you see just how much they absorb and learn, because in a traditional environment, you get your one discipline, right? But you're not exposed to the other disciplines the way you are in that kind of big room TVD approach. So
yeah, how many times do people on traditional projects get the opportunity to hear other cross-functional teams presenting on options? I mean, we never see that in traditional delivery ever. And you couldn't even see it at a conference. I've never even gone to a conference and seen like a mock big room cluster report out. I've heard people talk about someday doing it, but I mean, short of having that in your portfolio of jobs to go be a part of, it's something you're not going to get to witness very often.
that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, maybe a future webinar idea for you, James.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's exhausting, but it is the most fun. I mean, sitting in a room like that when everybody's kind of trying to climb the same hill. And, you know, the budgets sometimes are aggressive, and you really have to think outside the box. But those, I think, are the most fun.
Oh, we just make jokes behind the scenes, James. We say that all owners go to the same school, and they learn that at some point in the project, they have to start acting like they're broke, and they have to tell the team that, you know, they just got word and we got to cut 20% off of this budget, or we're 20% over budget. You know that in programming, we're already 20% over. You know, we hear these numbers all the time, and I always laugh, and you see people on the team that are new, and you just say like, no, this is just part of the game. This is part of the fun of it. Like, if you didn't have that constraint, the design team would not be as creative. Like, amazing things come out when you're back against the wall, having to be really creative. And then even better on these jobs where they show, you know, here's the number, and everybody on the team can see full transparency. Where are we in the budget? And they know that what I do with my team affects whether we're going to make it or not.
Yeah, it is. There is a manual. It's in chapter 1. We all, as soon as you become an owner, they mail it to you. It's true.
We suspected it. Now
the secret is
confirmed.
out.
It's been confirmed. Here it was. Let's mark it. 2020. We found out.
The secret is out. We'll just have to lower it to 30% or something.
Yeah,
to
you
mix
should.
It up.
You should just say 50%. Just watch what kind of innovation comes out of that.
But you're right when you say it's part of the game. I mean, one of my favorite things on a project is in the IPD jobs, what the grounds for change orders are a little bit different. So, you know, things that the team should have known are generally not increases to the contract. People still get paid for them.
Right.
And so one of my favorite things is when the designer or the builder comes back with a well-articulated argument about why something should be my cost. And because it never starts that way, because the rules are different. And it takes a while for people to adopt the new rules. But you can tell when someone gets the game now and they come back, and I generally, you know, pat them on the back and say, you know, welcome to the game. Let's play now. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to up my game now.
Yeah.
But those are fun. Those are fun, especially a hospital, right? You're a team for like 4 or 5 years together.
Yeah.
These are not quick things.
No, they're not. They become like family. We've had partners that have done IPD projects, and as it's getting to an end, you can see people getting like the long faces. They don't want it to be over. And we even had people that, you know, the contract where they were, not the contract, but the market where they were didn't allow for them to go to a subsequent IPD job. And they started looking to go elsewhere. Where else could they go?
And there's a lot of groups that are trying like their first one, but there aren't many groups that have made that have 20 within their program. And one, I think it's hard. Even at Sutter, like every couple of years, we had to kind of represent to the board of directors why it was a good idea. Because I think design, bid, build is really easy. Like if you're going to go buy a car, you know, and it's the same car from 3 dealerships, whoever's going to give you the best price, you should buy it from them, unless there's some kind of service, or your brother owns one of the dealerships or something, right?
Then it's a no-brainer. Don't buy his unless you're
Right.
in good terms.
But design and construction is just not that way. It's infinitely complex. It's like wanting to buy a car and having all the parts delivered to your driveway and then having 20 different companies show up and try to put them together,
Right. And then all the 20 different places all built to specs with ranges, and they don't have to look at how do the things actually fit together. It's so annoying.
And then my favorite. So I go through that process. And then if I want another car, like now my wife wants a car.
Right.
So instead of hiring all those same people, I'll go hire somebody else to start from scratch. Yes. And I'll build my whole supply chain again. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it.
It is crazy. It is. So, but so I want to ask you, now that you've got you've been attending YouTube University and doing Lean IPD, let's just say it's a successful website, hands down. You got a thriving board on there, a lot of good contributors. Shameless plug. You can check out my articles on Lean IPD's website anytime you like.
leanipd.com/blog.
That's right. leanipd.com/blog. We'll put it right here, and we'll just let it stay there on the screen for a little bit. Give people a chance to get it. And it'll be in the show notes too, so don't worry about that. There'll be a hyperlink for your convenience. We've mastered that. But what's something that has been surprising to you, James? Hosting that, not necessarily on the technical side, but what's surprising, like any kind of feedback from the industry that when you started this out that you didn't anticipate, that's been either a good surprise or a negative surprise?
So starting on the positive, I'm surprised at how much IPD there is in Canada. And it's most IPD project, if not all IPD projects in the US, are done by private owners. In Canada, almost all of the IPD projects are done on government projects.
Wow.
So their procurement rules are different. And so a lot of like fire stations, civic centers, schools are being delivered in Canada. And it's actually like a really, it's growing. Whereas I would say on the downside here, for all of the positive case studies that are out there about integrated project delivery and just lean construction in general, for all of the case studies that are out there, I'm surprised that the adoption curve is so low. And I mean, that's our job, right? That's your job. That's my job. Spread the word, and share. I'm just surprised the construction.
I thought that was you were going to go positive. You went negative. You tricked me.
I started positive because I like that everything's done in Canada. That's the positive, is that there are IPD jobs, and that I've learned that because I get more people reaching out for information from Canada than I do from the US. So that's a surprise to me. The negative, I guess, is not so much from the website, but you put all this information out there and people either aren't interested because they believe with all of their heart and soul that they're already doing everything already, or that they're just not interested. And so that's frustrating.
It is. I'm only laughing because I get that all the time.
Yeah, you've always done. I've been doing this, since 1900.
That's like a trigger word for a trigger phrase for me when I hear someone say, "But we've always done this," and this being lean. We've been lean. We've always been doing it. That's right. It's interesting to hear that. It always depends on who the individual is, how they respond. I don't have the boilerplate, like you said. One size doesn't fit all. There's not a one size fits all response for that phrase either. But it's always interesting because the people that say stuff like that, James, that's like a defense statement back to you when you're sharing something. It's never like this and we've always done this and it's great to learn this new thing you're doing, or this new thing you're doing like for 20 years, or this new thing that you're doing on over 20 projects, right? People are still like, no, it can't be. No, this other way is better. It's like, No, I remember going to a conference. I think it was a Design Build Institute Western Region conference 2 years ago, and one of the keynote speakers was talking about prefabrication. And this gentleman owns a prefabrication company. I want to say his name is Ryan Miller, and I can't remember the name of the company off the top of my head, but I'll look it up. If somebody messages me, I'll find him. And he was saying that the design and construction industry has become commoditized to a certain extent. And most of the companies are just eking out these little tiny niche margins. And I kept thinking, like, well, you obviously don't talk to subcontractors because their margins are way healthier. And it's, there's a level where specialization does get you either, when you're early to specialization, you can have a higher return. And I'm sure you've got IPD case studies where the owner got a lot of scope for little cost, right? But then as time goes on and people start to learn what the new normal is, you start seeing some diminishing returns. And that's where I think, some of that is in the industry. We have this incredible momentum. Like I was talking to this with someone on the show, $3 trillion a year, what we spend in the US on construction. 3 trillion, right? That's design and construction and support, right? It's a big number. But global economy, it's not that big of a number. But every country builds. It's done everywhere. We see, I can't even see pictures of things abroad, like, because I can't go anywhere right now, but when I used to before, and you don't see like in progress construction photos in the background. Like, how are we not getting better? Someone has said that one of the root causes could be lack of sharing. So here we are. You have a website. I have a podcast. We're trying to share. And I'm also surprised. I've seen the same thing. The outpouring from outside the U.S. is far greater than inside the U.S. for people tapping my shoulder for help or just being curious.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. And I think some of that is a friend of mine in a different industry said that there's this thing. It's called the arrival syndrome. You ever heard of it, James? So the arrival syndrome is this a psychological type of thinking mindset that once you've achieved a certain level of success, you get comfortable and complacent, like you made it. And we see this in sports teams all the time. It's like, you'll see a team win, and you can tell that I'm a Chicago fan, right? We won in a World Series finally, and then you don't see the team just automatically continue to win. There are some dynasty teams for sure in any sports, right?
But they're rare.
But they're rare.
They're less common than.
It's very rare. And people have said the hardest thing to do is to just not get complacent, or what people coin the arrival syndrome.
So another take on that, which I appreciate, that makes a lot of sense, is that the people are successful in this system. There are a lot of construction companies. There are a lot of design companies. There's a lot of people making good salaries.
Right.
I was joking. There's a lot of new trucks on the road, right? Whenever
Right.
my car breaks down and I'm like, I should go work for a contractor, because at least then I would get a gas card and a truck and I wouldn't have to worry about taking my car to the shop. So the point of all of that is that, like we said earlier, the owners are setting up the game and the designers and builders are finding a way to win at that game. And so until you start to change the rules, like maybe things are not going to change because people have figured out how to play the game.
Right.
I think about this a lot. In some ways, the best motivation for the construction industry to improve is with all lump sum contracts where they get to keep all of the gains. The cost reimbursed contracts, I think, they're not the way to get the cheapest project. I think they're the way to get the product that you want and to know how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take to get it before you spend a lot of money. So you can invest 1% to 2% of your project budget, get your team on board and quote, validate it, or whatever you want to call that initial phase.
Sure.
And you can get reliability out of that. And the team can help you with that TVD we talked about, make all those trade-offs. But none of that, another downside is after 20 IPD projects, the cost of the jobs were still way more than they were 10 years earlier. It's like we weren't doing things for less. I used to joke that if anything, costs were going up less fast, you know, which is,
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
my first IPD project, like, oh, we just do the job for 30% less. And the more time I spend, like the nature of the way the industry is organized and contracts are set up and the way the supply chain works and the way it's structurally very difficult to drive out 30%. I'm convinced there's 30 to 50% waste in the system,
Oh, yeah.
but getting it out is really, really, really hard. I don't know how to do it yet.
It's even more than that. Researchers have spent years looking at this, and I remember looking at a report by University of Minnesota, Dodge Data Analytics, and they threw some numbers out in conjunction with other surveys that have been done with Construction Industry Institute that the number is somewhere between 60 to 80% waste. So that's like, you know, every dollar in construction you spend, you got 40 cents potentially, if not almost 50 cents. You're paying too much.
Yeah, the owners are paying too much. The issue is that money doesn't disappear. That shows up as wages, you know.
Right.
It shows up. People, you know, that money is getting spent in the supply
Yes.
chain.
Right. But it's not getting spent on things that anyone wants, not valuable things necessarily, right? If we're trying to build a hospital that can treat patients, we might be spending a lot of money on inspections or other things that are necessary evils due to a myriad of reasons, because it's complex, like you said, right? How many people are stepping back and saying, how can we design this thing so that it just gives us more of what we want faster?
Yeah, I think, and there's a couple of companies out there that are trying, like the Kateras of the world, you know, and I'm hoping that some good case studies come out of those where, in that case, I feel it's like an owner steps in and says, I'm gonna own the entire supply chain. And then from that, I'll try to drive waste out. Now, I think, you know, people are trying to do it in traditional methodologies by buying traditional companies and putting them together.
Yeah.
I think you almost need a completely bottom up. I'm going to build a supply chain from scratch, which I don't know how much venture capital you need for that, but a lot, I think.
I mean, well, I can think of 3 case studies, all by the same CEO, where that's happened. SpaceX, Tesla,
right?
and Solar City, right?
Yeah, and fundamentally based on the numbers and the science. Like, this is what should be possible.
Yeah, with simple ideas like, I'm just going to hire the smartest people. Like, I can hear Elon in the back of my head. I'm just going to hire the smartest people. We're going to solve hard problems. We're going to have fun doing what we do. And that's like how they go. And now you see a very siloed automotive industry, even companies like Toyota looking to, well, we got to adapt. We can't ignore what Tesla's doing in the car space. And then you've got all kinds of things with electronic cars becoming just prevalent and predominant in the market. All the high luxury brands are already there, right? I mean, this has all happened really fast. I remember hearing somebody was talking the other day and said that the electric car was invented first, and then something like almost 10 years later, the gas engine was invented for the gas car. And like, why do we go gas? Right? Why don't we just stay electric? It's like, that's an interesting fact.
Yeah, and if you think about all the transportation costs associated with hauling gas around, it's like, it can't be. There's just some basic physics there
Right.
of moving weight around that don't seem like they make sense in the long term.
Yeah, so I think you're onto something in capital construction, and you want to. I think it'd be more for serial builders like a health system or a university or governments that are on the build every year, not the one-off, things. Though there are some interesting stories with one-off and smaller things, definitely. I mean, there is this momentum in the industry, though. Like, everyone right away wants to say, I want to mitigate risk, right? So just do what you've always done, because you know where your problems are going to be. So when it happens, nobody's like surprised. If you got to go back to your boss and say, yeah, the contractor took longer than their schedule said it would, they're not going to even get mad at you. They're not even going to raise their voice at you, James. They're going to be like, that's what happens in construction. 3 out of 4 jobs are late. 3 out of 4 jobs are over budget. and people just accept it.
Yeah, they do. It's
Right?
frustrating.
Yeah, it is, because you could be doing other things. Like from our perspective on the contractor side, we'd like to be chasing more work. We'd like to get the next thing and keep our people employed longer. Staying on a project longer doesn't make anybody any extra money. It's the same as true for the trade community. Like I always tell the foreman when we get to talk to foremen, your companies don't pay you any extra for being here longer, right? And they're like, no, it's a bad thing to be here
Right.
longer than we estimated. So we have some things that we have in common. There's definitely some common ground that we can move together, and I think there are some promising things happening. Organizations like LCI, where you've got owners talking to each other. I'm the vice chair of the Lean Construction Institute's community of practice in St. Louis, and there were a couple of owners on our panel, and they said the greatest value to them of being on the core team is being able to talk across organizations with other owners about, what can be done, what's possible. They didn't even know.
Right.
It's almost like someone has a website, they're not advertising it well so that people can even see what's there.
Right. They're giving it away, but nobody knows it's there.
How can we get people to know what's there and like how impactful it is?
I like and we gotta, I mean, this is on me and on is you got to put it in terms that are valuable to the receiver, right? What's in it for me? That whole
Right.
And I think the best case of lean adoption that I've seen, a plug for Dave McNeil of On Point Lean, is his like breakout presentation at LCI many years ago. He talked about this, it was like a hot dip galvanizing plant down in Louisiana, and they were building two of them at the same time. So it's one of the only case studies I know where somebody's literally building the exact same thing right next to each other.
Okay.
And one was implemented with 5S and last planner system, and the other one was implemented just with the traditional process. But eventually, the traditional process guys wanted to implement lean. And the reason that they did is because the guys on the lean job were getting to the bar 2 hours earlier every day than they were. And they were like, how are you guys getting here so early? And they're like, oh, we got this, this lean thing that we're doing. We're spray painting colors on our stuff and organizing it. And, so what's in it for me? I think the takeaway for me is you gotta think about, we got to do a better job of packaging it for people so they know what's in it for me.
I saw timely their cross promotion here. Lean Enterprise Institute published an article today on Planet Lean that said, here's the lean marketing canvas. And it's essentially it's the business canvas that a lot of entrepreneurs would recognize, but it's for how to market lean inside your organization or outside the customers, because people that do lean don't know how to market well. I mean, stereotypically. I'm not talking about everybody. Yeah. So if you're out there and you're doing
that boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. I remember people asking me, I had a new person start recently that has become one of my mentees. And she was asking, like, what is lean? And I told her what it is. And it's, fundamentally equates to just mindset of learning, right? Learning is the biggest thing. I said, yeah, there are some principles. Respect for people, super big. If you don't have that, you won't be into anything else. And continuous improvement. But it's all about having like a learning mindset and always being in a learning mode. And they were like, that's it? That's the big fuss? Like, that's too simple.
Like, it'll take you your whole life to figure it out, though.
Yeah, I'd always laugh because like when you come at it from the outside, and I came at it the same way. Like I thought, a decade ago, it was just, if you just eliminated waste, you'd be lean. And it took me years to not know it that way. Years.
Yeah, I don't really even talk about waste with actually,
right.
I was telling someone the other day, so I've been in my job now at UCSF for a year, and I haven't talked about lean at all. I've talked about making things visual. I've talked about getting things out quickly and getting feedback on it. This idea, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like, let's not design this thing forever and never actually show it to anyone. this concept of a validation and getting people on board early. I'm not like, I need an IPD contract. I'm working with our team, like find a way to get trades on board early so we can get their input before we go for funding. Like figure out how to do that. Yeah. I don't care how we do it.
You could even just buy them a breakfast or a lunch. They'll show up and give you feedback if you feed them.
Right. It was like my whole, I went 12 years in my career before I first learned the term free con. I was like, how did I get that far without knowing something that funny?
No, we have a saying in the office all the time. Like when someone in pre-construction is talking about this really awesome job, where it's like, well, wait, is it free con or is it pre-con?
Yeah.
And then continue the conversation because it will react differently.
Yeah, it's different.
That's the thing. It's the thing.
But for all my designer friends out there that, I think it was David Marr that said this, I don't understand why it's pre-con and construction. It's why is it not like design and post-design? Like, I don't get this. And the obvious answer is because design is never done. There's no such thing as post-design.
I remember we were doing a thing with the team last week, and it was the first time ever the leads of this wanted to go. They're still in programming, so it's way early on. And they're like, why don't we try one of these agile approaches? Because the architect just hates last planner system for some reason. No reason that anyone even knows. Like probably we didn't even ask, why don't you like it? Right. So they were like, okay, we'll try this agile approach. And the team's like, well, it's good because we have all this work. We've got like this ton of work to do. Like, just a stack of work to do. And it's not getting done. And the deadline's in 60 days. And I said, well, I bet you when we do this and you start making the work visual, like you said, we're going to find out that a lot of this design is already in progress and we need to slow it down and actually stop some of it and let more of it go in the right sequence. And sure enough, when we started visualizing what the work was, we had 10 people on the phone and we were doing it a digital scrum board. And we found out there was all kinds of things in flight, James, that would not need to be done until like 5 days before the big turnover reveal to the client. And we had to pull those things back. And it's like, that's why you got to make your work visual, because especially with knowledge work, so much of it's invisible. You got to let people see and then react to what's the most important thing today.
Yeah.
Like, so what's the most important thing we can do for Lean IPD? If you were a brand new person coming to the site, where should they go first?
Just to the integrated project delivery page and read. There's kind of a summary about some of the key concepts. I define integrated project delivery as kind of a combination of a contract, lean construction principles, and a collaborative culture.
Nice.
And so, if it's like we had said, you can do IPD without lean and lean without IPD. If you don't have a culture where people want to work together, and you have to work at that. It happens, but it happens over a real long period of time. And so if you want it to happen faster, so that's what I would suggest. Just there's a lot of good information out there on lean construction, and just start to get exposed to it. And I don't think you need to be a PhD in this stuff to start practicing it, right?
Agreed.
Get out there and roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty. More than anything.
Get your hands dirty. Yeah, and you guys have been on you're on the Northern California Lean Community of Practice core team. At one of your last events, I remember somebody saying, get started and just get started and get started. It could have been you. I think it might have actually been you.
I have this candle that a friend gave me like 20 years ago, but I still have it because I've never lit it. Yeah. But the box says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Right. So that's the philosophy there.
Right.
You got to start.
You've got to start. It doesn't matter what contract you're on. You've heard it here from James himself.
And then here's my other words of advice. I don't think you could read this.
Oh, yeah, I can read it. It says, good judgment comes from experience, experience comes from bad judgment.
So those
That's
are my
amazing.
words to live by.
Yeah.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. That's
Yeah.
lean for me in two quotes.
No, that's really interesting. And I wanted to ask you, you're on LCI's board and you're helping to shape what's going on. You've even been on a couple of Congress planning calls, especially when we shifted from pre-pandemic knowledge to post, because we were originally going to be in Detroit this year in 2020, and now we've gone 100% virtual. What was that like? Just making that decision. Were there some debating involved, or was it just like it's just a clear no-brainer, right thing to do?
Well, so a little background. So I got involved in the Northern California community of practice pretty quickly, and I've been involved in that group for about 10 years. And we put on local events, and
Right.
the venues get too expensive, and so we've been moving it around, trying to make sure that we at least break even on the events. And so I was the treasurer for a while, and just looking at what does it cost to put on events.
Yeah.
And then I had the honor to join the national board in January. And so it was clear that people were volunteering for things. And so I volunteered to be on the finance committee. And I was the only volunteer for the finance committee. So Mike Stawn, the chair, called me in like February, early March, and said, "Hey, would you be the treasurer? I mean, you really don't have to do much because the finances are pretty locked in. We've been consistent for years, but we need somebody to fill that role." And I said, "Okay, if you think it's not going to be a lot of work, I'll take that selfishly because I got other things to do."
Famous last words.
And then this thing called the coronavirus hits, and in March, and I was on calls once or twice a week because background for people without disclosing everything is that when you put on a conference of 1,500 people, you now have to make a commitment 3 years in advance to have a hotel, a block of rooms, and a conference center that can have the Lean Construction Conference in person is a room that fits 1,500 people, but then a whole bunch of 20 breakout rooms for all the other things. And so you need a pretty good size convention center with hotels that can hold that. Yeah. And so in order to get one, it's like Phoenix next year, St. Louis the year, or New Orleans the year after. So it's already booked out several years. Yeah. And so we had to pay a significant amount of the hotels in April, right when it had started. And it wasn't clear if the event was going to happen or not. And so all of a sudden you start looking at the cash flow going like, wow, we're going to go from having money left at the end of the year that we can reinvest to have a bigger Congress the year after, to, maybe we're not going to be able to put on the event. And we looked at different scenarios, and the worst scenario, which probably would have happened now in hindsight, but we're trying to decide in April as this thing is just starting, is to hold the event and have no one show up. That was the biggest thing, because it costs a lot of money to put on an in-person event like that. If you haven't been in person, I'd highly encourage you to go. It's not just a plug. It's really a lot of fun. I consider it like a family reunion now when I go. I see people from all over the country that have similar mindset to you and me that are out there trying things and the stories are great.
Yes,
the presentations are good, but the happy hours are better.
Way better.
So all of that so we started looking at this idea of a virtual conference. And so, kudos to you and the team for really, as you mentioned earlier, planning 2 conferences.
Yeah.
Because the work was really, I forget when exactly you do the call for speakers, but in general, you have all the speakers figured out in the April-May timeframe. Right. Is that right? So
typically.
So the agenda is figured out. It's kudos to you and the conference planning team. And that is an amazing, and it's a volunteer effort.
Right.
It's an incredible lift
Yeah,
to
thank you.
put on.
I remember Jeff Crichton calling me. He's the chair. And he said, is it typically this much work? He's like, I'm on the phone. It feels like every day. But he's like, I know it's not every day, but it just feels like. It's like, well, Jeff, you're planning two events. And if you allow the team to keep going with this third idea of a hybrid, you're going to plan 3 events. And at some point, someone's going to make a decision. So you just got to think with the little bit that you know, who can we talk to? You know, who can LCI get involved and figure this out? And they started reaching out to some more of the support people, like the conference direct that they work with, and got some really good feedback from that team, things that we just didn't have the perspective on. And that helped to inform the team. And as the information came in, it became more obvious, like what should be done. I've heard people today, James, talking about events that, you know, some people just put their head down and said, we're going to have our event anyway, and no one showed up. I've heard from a couple of people that have had, like, even just simple golf things across the country. It kind of depends on where you are, and no one comes. And then other places where people practice socially distancing, and you see, you know, some smaller form of it happen, but it's not the same. A friend of ours was even talking about just having a friend get together at a dinner for like a baby shower, and they just couldn't even do it with the restaurant. There wasn't a restaurant in their area that could handle 20 people showing up. They just couldn't do it.
Spread out enough.
And spread out enough. Yeah, it could not be done where they lived. I mean, just a lot of change for folks. And one of the lucky things that we did as a Congress planning team is that we drink our own Kool-Aid, right? So we know we have to adapt. So when a change happened, I remember Romano, who's on the board too, told the team, he's like, the enthusiasm that you guys have maintained, you know, given all the changes we're throwing at you, has just been unbelievable. And the team was like, well, we have to, because that's just what we do. We have to adapt. We have to.
I think, and also you have a chance to share this Congress with people in a way that hasn't been shared before, because in a virtual environment, you know, in looking at my own budgeting, I mean, it's $2,000 to $3,000 to send somebody in person for 4 days to a conference with flights and hotel rooms.
Right.
So it's a significant investment, and you know, you can attend all 4 days for less than $1,000. I forget what the exact pricing is. More people can attend without the travel, and so, you know, I think you and the others really got on board with this idea of like, this could be the biggest conference ever. I mean, it's going to be different. It's going to be different for sure, because we've got more days of program, right? And shorter days of program, because we all know what the Zoom fatigue is real. I read an article the other day about Zoom apnea, that they've done some studies that you actually stop breathing on conference calls. And
well, you got me laughing so hard. There's no chance of us stopping breathing on this one.
So yeah, I think it's going to be exciting. Just one other kind of joke is, if we weren't able to get out all the deposits for the hotels, but we still did a virtual event, I was going to organize just a massive party. We were going to go to Detroit and see if we could work through the deposit. So instead, the folks in Detroit were excellent. So now essentially what we did is negotiated to push it out 3 years, so that we will go to Detroit eventually. Probably after the virtual Congress this year, we'll start talking in December or January about whether it's likely that we're going to have an in-person event a year from now.
It's hard to say. There's so many variables with that, but you're totally right. If you have never been to Congress before in person, and I had only started attending my first Congress, I think, was only 5 years ago. In Chicago was my first one, and yeah, you've got to definitely go, and if you can, and the virtual is going to be really good. I've recorded all my sessions, James, like a good little volunteer. All my session recordings are done, and I'm going to have a blast interacting with the attendees in the chat during my entire presentation, because I won't be busy running my mouth like I usually am. I could
right?
answer questions and even connect with people post event. Like that's one of the great things about the communities of practice. I want to plug them too because the networking you can do in the communities of practice, like because of COVID, I've been able to participate with Southern California, which I couldn't do as often because of the travel. We used to, get lucky and align the stars to be down there for a project reason and then do it. And then even attending your events in this neck of the woods now has been like a no-brainer. When something comes up, if my calendar's open, I'm there. Throw my money in. I think you guys charge too little though. You should charge a
Yeah, we
little
go
more.
back and forth on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely for the value that people get. Like I remember the last one that I went to, you had a team from University of California, Davis, presenting on an eye center project, and hearing the client talk about, I had to write it down. I was so excited. She was ecstatic with the team's progress, like hitting where they needed to be with budget and being ahead of schedule. The architect working so tight together with the general contractor was refreshing. Right? These are not my words. These are her words.
Right.
And they shared it with everybody. They're just like, here's how we did it. So you have all these people calling in. I think you had some people from overseas too. You had some international participants as well. And saying like, look at what can be done. And it's just that collaboration that happens in that group. I was telling the board or Romano, and the team in the last time, we're early on with this planning team. Where else does that happen? Where else do people just let their guard down and just be honest about what's going on?
Yeah, this virtual format allows us to network more outside. We did a virtual meeting, and we implemented the breakout rooms for just networking, where you get these little short.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I was surprised, but there were people from all over the country, which was interesting, who I never would have met, at a local event. If we're meeting in Oakland or something, we're not going to have people in general fly in for the event. But when it's online, people can stop in for an hour.
Yeah. And you guys do your salad talk. What do you do that? That's like, I think that's unique to your group.
Well, there's one thing about you do the plus deltas at the end of every meeting, right?
Right.
So whatever's working gets repeated, and whatever's not eventually dies off. So I don't know when it started, but the salad chat is, we ask a question to the group. When we were in person, they would be at dinner and during the salad, supposedly. And it's usually a question that's asked to get people to talk to each other, but also some kind of leading question that the presentation will then go much deeper into detail on. And it virtually it worked too. So we gave people a salad chat for the breakout room. So if they didn't know each other, they had something to talk about. In my case, you end up with somebody, and maybe we didn't talk that much about the salad chat. Maybe.
Yeah. I remember being at one of your events in Walnut Creek, and I bumped into a lighting design architect, and we were in the salad chat, and that ended up being a great relationship. I got a chance to go tour her office in San Francisco, and we had some mutual friends, and it was just like, wow, I never would have been able to do that had we not had the salad chat, right? Because I ended up sitting at a table after the salad chat with people that I knew. It's like, I see you guys all the time.
There's maybe something to be said too for, if you truly buy into this idea of continuous improvement, it means that you're open to the fact that whatever you're doing today is not as good as it can be.
Yes.
Right. So there's an inherent humbleness, like, I know what I'm doing can be better, and that I need to go learn from other people, and I need to improve. So the point of that is, like, you put a room of people that are just open to say, yeah, I tried this and it didn't work. And I find that those relationships become really good relationships. And a lot of those people I consider to be friends that I've worked with over many, many years, where before I got involved in LCI, just the lean construction in general and IPD, when you finished a job, you never wanted to see the people again. Right. It was like, I cannot wait until this job is over and I never have to work with these people again. And my first IPD job finished, and, a bunch of the different trades and the designers, we got together for dinner and celebrated a job well done. And I was like, I want to do that again.
Yeah.
Like, that was cool.
That's very cool. Those are rare, and you're lucky. You lucky ducky. You've had so many of those happen time after time, and you forged extremely deep relationships. So
There's a lot of good people out there, right?
Right.
But you got to be. I joke that they in an IPD, the smartest, best people are your allies. And if you have an adversarial contract, the smartest, best people are going to be kicking your butt every day. They're going to outwork you. They're going to out hustle you. So I'm like, hey, I'm not that smart. I don't, I better get these guys on my side. And
yeah,
I better get these teams on my side to help out.
yeah, that's really good. I like that that helping mode that you're in, and I want to close down our little talk on that positive helping mode. You went back to things that I like, and that's just thinking about there are other people who figured it out that can help you. I definitely agree, and you've been great, James. Sharing your time with people and some of your insights definitely made me laugh a ton, a ton. I'm going to go back and I'm going to share that sign with my son. And as I tell him, like, whenever he has a hard day, I was like, what a great character building day it was.
Right?
We learn more from the hard days than the good days sometimes.
Absolutely.
That's great. But yeah, thank you, man, for coming on the show. Really appreciate you being here.
Well, Felipe, I appreciate you inviting me, and just keep it up. I love that you've got this podcast going, and I love the content that you're putting out, and I think you're going to make a difference. So thank you for that.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.